Let's start tonight with a bit of history that feels like it belongs in a different century because, frankly, it does. In 1947, when the National Security Act was signed into law, it wasn't just about creating the CIA or the Department of Defense as we know them today. It was about a very specific, very American anxiety. It was the post-war realization that the sheer scale of our military power, the sheer terrifying lethality of the American machine required a firewall, not a physical wall, but a legal and moral one. A firewall between the raw power of the commander-in-chief and the political machinations of the person holding that office. The idea was simple. You cannot use the sword of the state to sharpen your own political axes. It is the bedrock. It is the thing that makes us a republic and not a junta. And for decades, that firewall held. Even through the darkest days of the 20th century, through the scandals that broke presidencies and the wars that broke our hearts, there was a line you simply did not cross. You didn't treat the movement of troops or the authorization of defense assets like a poker chip at a campaign rally. You didn't ask a general to pay to play with the security of the United States. But tonight, we are looking at something that, if the reporting holds, represents not just a crack in that firewall, but its total, intentional demolition. We are talking about a document that surfaced just days ago, on December 28th. A document that is currently sitting in a SCIF, a secure compartmented information facility on Capitol Hill, being read by stunned members of both parties. And the reason they are stunned is not just the what of the memo, but the who and the why. Because for the first time in the modern era, we aren't just hearing rumors of executive overreach. We are seeing a formal bipartisan rebellion. We are talking about 47 members of Congress. And look at the math there, 16 of them are Republicans. 16 members of the president's own party have looked at the evidence, looked at their oaths of office, and decided that the loyalty they were told was mandatory is actually secondary to the survival of the rule of law. The story we are tracking tonight involves a leaked classified memo dated just 3 weeks ago, which allegedly details direct, personal orders from the White House to the Pentagon. But these weren't orders about strategy. These weren't orders about troop withdrawals or budget reallocations. According to sources who have seen the text, these were orders to hold, to delay, to wait. Specifically, to delay 3 critical military authorizations involving intelligence gathering and force protection in high-threat environments until, and I am quoting the reporting here, the commanders involved publicly endorsed certain administration policies. This wasn't a policy debate. This was an ultimatum. It was a demand for a political endorsement in exchange for the safety of American service members. And tonight, that memo has triggered an explosion in Washington that is making the Watergate era look like a minor procedural disagreement. When you have the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, a man who has spent the last several years as a steadfast, vocal defender of this administration, standing on the House floor with his voice literally shaking, reading a demand for the president's resignation, you know the ground has shifted. You know that the unprecedented has finally become the unavoidable. We are going to walk you through exactly what is in that memo, how it leaked, and why those 16 Republicans decided that today was the day the firewall finally came down. Here is the thing about a quid pro quo. We usually talk about it in the context of back alley deals or shady corporate contracts, this for that. But in the constitutional sense, when you apply that logic to the United States military, you aren't just talking about a bad deal. You are talking about a fundamental corruption of the chain of command. And that is exactly what makes this December 28th memo so radioactive. According to the reporting and the frantic closed-door meetings held on December 27th, the memo dated from 3 weeks ago details 3 specific holds on military operations. These weren't desk jockey authorizations. We are talking about time-sensitive intelligence gathering and force protection measures in hostile regions, the kind of operations where delay is a word that gets people killed. And the quo, the thing the White House allegedly wanted in exchange for releasing those holds, was for specific, high-ranking generals to appear at campaign rallies and publicly endorse the administration's political agenda. Now, Pause there, because if you are a student of history, or even if you just remember the headlines from the first impeachment, you know that the civilian control of the military is a concept that is supposed to be boring because it is so stable. The president is the commander-in-chief, that's Article 2, Section 2, but that authority is not a personal ATM for political favors. There is a reason the Posse Comitatus Act exists. There is a reason the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ, is so strict about partisan activities by service members. It is because the moment the military becomes a political tool, it ceases to be a national defense force and starts looking like a private militia. The reason 16 Republicans, including the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, just joined 31 Democrats to demand a resignation is that this memo doesn't just suggest a policy disagreement. It suggests that the White House was using the safety of troops as a bargaining chip. It is the shaking voice on the House floor we saw from that Republican chairman. He wasn't just reading a letter, he was reading the obituary for the idea that loyalty to the party could coexist with this level of alleged betrayal of the oath. When Nixon faced the Saturday Night Massacre, it was about firing a prosecutor. When Clinton faced the Lewinsky scandal, it was about personal conduct and dishonesty. But this is about the unmooring of American military power that I wrote about years ago. It is the nightmare scenario where the most powerful military in human history is being steered not by national interest, but by a campaign spreadsheet. And tonight, the political survival of the presidency is no longer a partisan question. It has become a question of whether the 47 members of that bipartisan coalition can convince their colleagues that the line has not just been crossed, it has been erased. This is where the story stops being about a memo and starts being about the future of the American experiment. We have spent decades talking about red lines and norms and checks and balances as if they were physical structures, like the marble pillars of the Capitol or the reinforced concrete of the Pentagon. But what we are learning tonight, what those 47 members of Congress, those 16 Republicans and 31 Democrats are telling us with their unprecedented demand is that those pillars are only as strong as the people standing behind them. When you look at the history of this country, the moments that define us aren't the moments where everything goes right. They are the moments of maximum pressure, where the tension between political survival and constitutional duty becomes so great that something has to snap. In 1974, it was Barry Goldwater and a small group of Republicans walking into the Oval Office to tell Richard Nixon the jig was up. They didn't do it because they stopped being Republicans. They did it because they realized that if they didn't, there wouldn't be a republic left to govern. Tonight, we are seeing the 2026 version of that walk. Only this time, it isn't happening in the shadows of the Oval Office. It's happening in the bright, unforgiving light of the House floor. It's happening in the shaking voice of a veteran-turned congressman who realized he could no longer defend the indefensible. It's happening in the secure rooms where the loyalty of the party is being weighed against the safety of the troops in the field. The question for the next 24 hours isn't just whether the president will resign. The question is whether the rest of the party, those who haven't yet signed that letter, those who are currently deciding whether to attack the leak or address the substance, will choose to rebuild the firewall or let the whole house burn down. Because once you establish that military operations are just another form of campaign currency, you don't have a commander-in-chief anymore. You have something else entirely. And that is a something else that the 47 members of this uprising have decided they can no longer live with. Thank you.